Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first ever bonus mini episode for the Digital Analytics Power Hour. I'm Tim Wilson, Senior Director of Analytics at Search Discovery, and for this inaugural bonus episode, which is an experiment, it's just me and my guest. We're hoping to do other episodes like this throughout the year, shorter, maybe a little less edited, and with just myself or Michael or Mo talking one on one with a guest. Maybe it'll be a past guest, maybe it won't. Today's guest is a past guest. So it's an experiment, a content experiment, and we're hoping you provide us with some feedback, positive or negative, by tweeting to us at Analytics Hour or reaching out to us through our Facebook page or through the Measure Slack team. Which, speaking of the Measure Slack team, that's the topic of today's little mini episode. We tout it on every regular episode of the show, and all three of us co-hosts are active participants. But I wanted to sit down with the founder and shepherd of the Measure Slack team himself and chat a bit about it. I've known Lee Isensee for years. We actually figured out that we were first together via teleconference, I think back in early 2006, when I was managing the BI team at National Instruments and Lee was a professional services consultant at Sane Solutions. Lee was with Sane through their acquisition by Unica, and then Unica's subsequent acquisition by IBM, at which point he'd had enough of that silliness. So he's also held senior roles at Localytics and Search Discovery. But today I'm talking with him about his role as the founder of the wildly successful and continually growing online community known as the Measure Slack. So Lee, thanks for agreeing to be the inaugural participant in this little content experiment.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the very kind words.
Certainly. So maybe we can start with the most basic of basic questions, which I struggle when somebody who's not familiar with it asks me, what is Slack? Forget Measure Slack. What is Slack?
Good question. I know how I've used it, and I'm certainly not on Slack's marketing team. So this might not be the perfect description. But the ways that I've used it in the past is kind of like a team collaboration platform, where previously you would have sent a bunch of email or you would have had a chat platform like I remember Party Chat going through Google Talk, a way to instantly communicate, share files, and quickly get feedback on a specific topic from peers within your business or depending on how it's set up, such as Measure Slack, with others in the industry to get you through your day.
Got it. Yeah. So it's somehow they just have figured out an interface that actually seems smooth and easy to use, replacing multiple other channels of communication. And I have trouble describing exactly how that magic happens.
It's basically a pretty version of IRC, just everyone's so young that they don't remember what IRC is.
So then the Measure Slack, and you kind of alluded to it, is a team not really set up in my view, it's not really the core of what Slack markets themselves for, because they're kind of saying it's for, intra-organizational communication. But you've kind of started it as the Measure Slack is more of an online community. So I guess where did that come from and how does that work?
Yeah, so Slack itself has a couple different tiers of pricing for their products, some as high as I think almost $10 per user per month. Then they have some middle tier, and those two tiers are great because you have unlimited storage of all your communication. The free tier, which is what we're at, obviously is zero cost to the group that's running it, but there are quite a bit of limitations. We've tried to work around those limitations, but so far it's worked out well. It's kept a rapid pace in the industry that I haven't seen before, and I think that's only a partial answer to your question.
Well, the second part was kind of where did it come from? And you wrote a post, I will say, on the www.measure.chat. You've kind of written out the post, so now in a sense maybe we're just making the audio channel communication, but it's got a really long history. I think that's kind of interesting that led up to why we landed with this now, what you were immediately replacing, but also kind of its longer predecessor's genesis.
Yeah. So the short version is there's a lot of really nice people in the analytics industry and then there's a couple really mean people. And a number of years ago, I got myself mixed up with those mean people, and they're the ones who at conferences are, thinking and saying snarky comments, and we needed a way to do that in a way that was convenient for folks without getting caught. So we started using a program called Beluga. Unfortunately, Beluga got acquired by Facebook. Then we moved on to a couple different other platforms. And then ultimately, I kind of came to the realization that we probably want to bring those nice people into the loop. We can still keep talking smack, but there's probably some productivity that could be had. At the time, I was at Localytics, and we got in on Slack pretty early on and figured out that Slack would probably be a decent platform to start using to try this experiment out. Started with myself and probably 10 people, quickly grew to 50. Next thing I knew, I think we were at almost 500 by just people writing me or asking to be added. And at that point, I realized, crap, this is working, and I'm going to have to make this scale. And at a free tier of Slack, making that scale is pretty tough. But they're obviously, we're not in their wheelhouse for key business. But they've been really cool with us. I know we're not the biggest team that they have, but we aren't certainly free for them to host.
And so how long, I'm trying to think, how long has it been around now? The
Measure Slack or the original Troublemaker group?
Well, the Troublemaker group that I was kind of on the periphery of that. It depended on whether I was the object of derision or whether I was able to critique others. But no, I meant the Measure Slack team itself.
Yeah, the first inklings started because I was really just curious if Slack hadn't registered measure.slack.com. So I'm like, I might use this someday. So if you want to go technically, I think maybe July of 2014.
Oh, wow.
But if you look at when I started adding more than 2 or 3 people, it was around November of 2014.
Okay. And that was, I guess it sort of became the convergence of, there were the snarky conference, because what had happened, I think, with that, the snarky conference team, evil forces, whatever we were called, it was like there was the conferences, and then there was, that was bleeding over where it was post-conference and pre-conference. So there was that little community, and then there was, I guess, the Measure hashtag on Twitter, which started out as awesome and rich and vibrant, but the signal to noise has kind of drifted steadily towards noise over the years. And so the Measure Slack kind of wound up being a convergence of those two. Is that a fair?
Yeah, Team Evil Forces, that's kind of the snarky group. It was just a little too blue and, little blue collar for, something you'd want to use the, hash measure tag on Twitter. So, I think you touched upon, how hash measure became a little noisy. Washington State took over, hash
the original.
WA.
That was, but yeah.
We kept kind of messing ourselves up or doing dumb things, and I realized I wanted to include vendors. There's a number of situations where vendors get a bad name, but there's a lot of really smart people, and vendors kind of ruined the Measure hashtag on Twitter by just spamming the hell out of it. But I knew there was a place for vendors. So the idea of Measure Slack kind of was, how do we get more people together and how do we include vendors? I was a consultant at a vendor for years, and I always felt kind of put in the corner on conferences. And, I dealt with 100 or so clients at one point and was told, no, I can't speak. But it's not at the fault of any of those people. There just wasn't a way to make sure that a vendor wasn't going to say or do the wrong thing. This, approach with Slack, as an administrator, a couple of the administrators, we can say, slap of the wrist and delete your message. You were out of line. Now and that's it.
Well, and the fact is, I guess that's because it's technically a closed community. When you go to sign up, you've got the not the first few hundred people, but I mean, by the time I signed up, it has the blurb that says this is the code of conduct, which you can't really enforce on Twitter for a hashtag. So, and I think like my sense is that for the most part, because people are having to opt into that, there have been cases where you have had to step in, and I'm not one of part of the team of kind of the advisors you use, but through the grapevine that you guys kind of take it pretty seriously. That you don't want to be the overlord who is overly restricted. You want open conversation, but there is a line, and when that line is crossed, action gets taken pretty quickly and it's up to the person to kind of correct their behavior, right?
Yeah, we have the ban hammer. We prefer not to use it, but when we do, we're pretty serious about it. And thus far, I can honestly say there's only been one incident that really bothered me, and maybe one or two more that the person didn't know why they were out of line, and multiple people pointed out they were out of line, and finally you're like, dude, if you don't know why, you just got to go bye-bye.
So how you said you'd gotten to 500 pretty quickly. Where is it now? Kind of into January, early February.
Yeah, I do, being in the analytics industry, do try to keep track of a couple basic metrics. If I look at including the original 500, we're well over 4,000 people that have asked for registration. Within that, we're at just about 4,000 from the new system, so probably closer to 4,500. The really neat thing is, I've been trying to keep track of this. We went from kind of this trickle of new people coming in where I'd see a little splash of maybe you at a conference in England, and all of a sudden there's 50 or 60 new people, but normally we're at 5 or so per day, to like at this point I think we're averaging between 125 and 150 a week.
Wow.
And it's kind of crazy. I've got, like I shared in Measure Slack, a heat map. Like, we know exactly when people are typically joining or asking for requests, what time of day. So, some really cool stuff. And the part that makes me the most proud, I don't want to like poo-poo on other groups, but there's a difficulty in any industry where you're asking people to be the primary source of information for that industry or that community. And having some original having some idea or insight to how others have run into issues with this. I've seen engagement, and engagement isn't just consumption of messages in Measure Slack, but actually posting. We were pretty consistent between 18 and 25% user engagement day over day. That's insane to me. That just about 4,000 people or so, because you get dupes and all that, but almost 25% are daily in adding messages. And when you add in, people who are actually reading, so I'll look at. I just love this. Around Christmas time, December 27th, of the people who are reading, 96 are in public channels. They were engaging. Of that, 21% of the message, or 78% of the messages posted were in the public channel. People are sharing. There is a lot of communication in kind of direct messages and private channels, but 78%, I look a little further along, there's a massive amount of information that's shared to the public. And when you have an engagement level, not just consuming, but sharing, that kicks ass.
Yeah, I mean, it does. Every time I go in, and I've had to shift the way I use it, in that I have a couple of channels that I try to make sure I always go and catch up, and then other ones that I flat out know that I'm not going to be able to keep up. But it is constantly being lit up with there's new content there, which I think the last couple of minutes I kind of want to shift, because that's one of the challenges of the growth, is that free platform. It's a limited to like 10,000 messages, and then it kind of goes off into an archive. And so the history that's available is getting smaller and smaller. And I know you've done stuff in the back to say, well, let's not make sure that it's totally lost. It's kind of lost to all the users. So you recently kind of started a wiki. So can you sort of talk about kind of the wiki component or the right. And right in thinking the wiki is kind of intended to be, hey, if somebody takes the time to say, let's move some you really valuable content, grab it out of Slack and put it there is kind of a way to address that.
Yeah, you touched upon the key issue that's, from day one, Slack is free. Or in our case, we were choosing to use the free version because a paid version would be 60 grand a year. And for every person who comes on, it's just, a couple more dollars. We're not going to run a PBS, fundraising drive, I think. But there is, to that point, the first in is the first out for those messages. And there was one point where it was just crazy busy, and that 10,000 message buffer was gone in like a week and a half. And it's unfair because there are casual consumers. I can look at the week over week versus day over day. And those casual consumers of the content, every channel would be lit up, or maybe just a couple, and there'd be so much, there was no way to capture some of the brilliance that people were sharing. And it's been a problem. Like I mentioned, this has been going on since November 2014. And my attitude was kind of, you're getting something for free, too bad. Then, the idea of Slackalytics, which was, developed by, pretty cool guy, Nico, kind of came about, and I said, well, we can use this and throw all the data into, a Mongo database. And if I ever run into a situation where I need to fact check anything, because, that's pretty important. We always have this one source of truth. It's not pretty. It's not great for reporting. But the fact is, I can give you absolute metrics and look for exact messages in the public channels. So we don't capture the private channels or direct messages or the local channels just for privacy. And we can't in some cases. But, I think, Tim, you mentioned a while back that a wiki or something might be good. Like, hey, people are contributing. Why don't we give them somewhere to do that? It wasn't me, because
I am baffled by wikis. So there's no way that I
don't know. There's a guy out there named Tim. No, it's someone recommended wiki quite a while ago. And then I kind of blew it off like, that's just going to be more work. And honestly, like, it's not that Measure Slack is a full-time job, but there's time committed. And I know managing a wiki and being the sole person contributing is just more than I wanted to take on. But there'd been some recent frustration from folks about not being able to get content, and they swore that they just saw it, and they continued to ask me, and I had to go into Mongo, get the raw data, which was tough for conversations and for the person to distill. And, it was brought up again, like, hey, let's try a wiki. Is that something that you can do? And you won't have to be the person. I'm like, fine, I will install MediaWiki. I will make it open. I will announce it. And I will leave it out to you guys to be the contributors. It is completely 100%, feast or famine on the wiki. If you want to contribute, have at it. If you want to continue to converse and hopefully someone grabs the content and distills it down, then that's really nice of them. But if no one does it, you've got 10,000 messages. Bye-bye.
So I'd say so Measure Slack is definitely, the Slack team is kind of absolutely taken off. It's blown up, and you have a good process. The wiki is very much in its nascency. I wound up adding a page. First time I've ever created a wiki page, and it's very sparse. So I think we'll see how that goes. But that is asking users to take another step, and but it's a great opportunity for anybody who says, I really love this channel. Maybe I'll start trying to build some organized, pull the resources and content from that.
Yeah, it's really neat because some dense channels, when I say dense in this case, I mean kind of heartfelt communications, are really, really coming across. Like the analytics library, folks have been really frustrated on, how do I learn more about the industry? What can I read? And there hasn't been a great resource. And, Dylan Lewis said, well, I'm sick of answering that, and my team at work wants to know. So, hey, I'll create this page. And, you went out of your way and created the R page and some of the other data oriented stuff. and women in analytics. If I look at kind of those three topics or, the channels associated, I'm surprised at some of them being the first, but I'm not surprised that there was a desire to have the content put in more of a or less ephemeral state.
Okay. Cool. So let me ask one more question. A little bit of a surprise, maybe. What's your did anything scare you about the future of the Measure Slack? Anything? What are you most nervous about?
Yeah, my concern is a consultancy, agency, vendor, whatever, is going to walk up and say, yeah, we'll take the 60 grand. Don't worry. We don't need the contacts. We don't need to have any advertising. We're happy to pick up the bill. The reason I'm scared about that isn't that, hey, this is now a real funded thing, but there's a responsibility of having someone's money and having users associated with someone else's money, where their benefit is something that they're using on and off. It's scary to know that someone has decided that 60 grand is something worth investing in or spending in Measure Slack because it makes it too real, I think, for me. Right now, it's just this cool thing like, oh, yeah, 4,000 people wanted to get on board and we got a wiki. And, next thing you know, we're going to have Tim, TG Wilson at measure.chat. We're going to be handing out email addresses for people. I like the fact that it's a business that's not a business, that makes things easier for people. And 60 grand would make a lot of people happy, but I think it's a responsibility that would frustrate me and scare me every day.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up. Thanks for really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today. Even more appreciative of your tireless efforts actually managing the team. So listeners, if you enjoyed this little diversion, please let us know again by tweeting to @AnalyticsHour, leaving a comment on our Facebook page, or of course, posting your thoughts on the Measure Slack team. You can do that in the blogs and podcast channel. You can private message me or Mo or Michael or all three of us at once. Or if you're not yet a member of the Measure Slack, you can go to join.measure.chat, fill out the form, sign up. You'll be in no time and your life will be better for it. So hopefully you'll give us some feedback on whether you like this sort of thing. For my regular co-hosts, Mo and Michael, this is Tim Wilson saying, keep slacking.